Welcome to In Your Defense with Amy Bingham.
Hello and welcome to In Your Defense with experienced attorney Amy Bingham. My name is Kevin Rosenquist. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to discuss the Miranda warning and how to protect yourself against interrogations on today's episode. Amy, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well.
All right. I can't say the word interrogation, so maybe we'll leave that one to you. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is involved in the Miranda warning?
So the Miranda warning is a set of rights that you have that the police are required to give you in an interrogation or when they are going to be questioning you.
Okay.
So it is a safeguard that informs you of what your rights essentially are. And everybody's probably familiar with these because you see them on TV all the time. TV
Law and Order.
In fact, I would think that most people would know or could cite it off, spout it off to you better than an officer might be able to.
I could do pretty good, I think. I watched a lot of Law and Order in my life.
I think one of the things that people get confused about with Miranda is they think that if an officer talks to them, that they have to give them the Miranda warning. And that is just not accurate. So a Miranda warning is only required before a custodial interrogation. And so there are different legal definitions of what a custodial interrogation means and ways that we as attorneys figure out whether or not that warning was given appropriately and at the right time, all of those kinds of situations. But just know that an officer can invite you down to the station and sit you in an interrogation room and ask you questions without having to give you the Miranda warning.
Okay. Yeah, but that's a common misconception, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
So can you kind of talk about the historical context of it and how, this requirement kind of sort of came to be?
Sure. So prior to the 1960s, officers weren't required to tell you anything. Any rights that you had, you were either assumed to know or, hey, it's too bad for you. And so there was a case called Miranda versus the state of Arizona, in which Mr. Miranda was asking the Supreme Court to reverse his conviction based on the fact that he was not given any information about his rights. He didn't understand that he had the right to remain silent. He didn't understand that he had the right to an attorney. He didn't understand a lot about the process. And so he was asking the courts to reverse everything, bring him back to, say the beginning and overturn his conviction, requiring that the police then give these warnings. And the Supreme Court sided with Mr. Miranda, and that's where we get Miranda warnings.
Oh, okay. I feel like a lot of people probably think they can kind of talk their way out of a situation, kind of disregard the Miranda warning. Tell me, why is that a bad idea?
So it's a bad idea because you're going to give more information than you think you're giving.
Yeah.
If police are questioning you, they either already suspect that you have done something or they already have enough information to arrest you and just want you to confess to make the prosecutor's job easier. So thinking that you can talk yourself out of charges is just a misconception. It's just not true. It won't happen. If anything, you will be talking yourself into more charges.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I talk too much. That's why I'm a podcaster. How do emotions cloud judgment during police encounters in your experience? I mean, I feel like, if you're kind of emotionally charged up, there could be, nervousness or fear can definitely lead to some self-incrimination. Have you had any specific examples of that you've seen?
So many. I think just about everyone who has any interaction with police know that feeling of panic. Say you're driving down the road and you see those lights, or you just see the car parked on the side of the road. You feel that well of panic, that, moment, because you don't want to get a ticket.
No.
Maybe you were speeding. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you were driving below the speed limit and everything is fine. But it's hard to control that automatic panic feeling, that adrenaline rushing up. And when you are actually speaking to an officer in a situation where they have the control, they have the power, you're going to have high stress. You're going to have high adrenaline. You're going to be emotional. And when you have high adrenaline, you just don't have the ability to think cognitively. You can't think straight. Your decision-making ability also decreases. So you may think you're making a good decision. Let me just explain the situation and they'll understand. Right. And that's never right. We are emotional beings. That's what we are as human beings. We're emotional, and emotions cloud judgment. It's just a fact. It's why when you get in a fight with your spouse, it's a good idea to shut up and walk away. You get more biblical,
Yep, that's good advice for a different podcast, but that's good advice.
Right. So it's the same thing with the police. Just keep silent. You have the right to keep silent. Use it.
Yeah. And I suppose false confidence comes in too, right? If you start to feel like, oh, I'll explain my side of the story. I'm a good talker. I'm a salesperson. I've got a good just demeanor. People love listening to me talk. I can get out of this, like that. I don't know, almost borderline cockiness kind of thing, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. Kind of a narcissist feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There's many people who think that they can talk their way out of something. If I can convince the officer not to charge me or not to arrest me, then I'm golden. Not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But you're forgetting that body cameras exist, right?
Dash
So
cams.
right. Not the only person that you have to convince. And you are putting everything that you say on the record, and it can be used against you, and it will be used against you. So whether you think you're the smartest person in the world or you think you're the dumbest person, it's best to just keep silent. Even if you know with 100% certainty that you were innocent of anything that they think you've done, you still keep your mouth shut. You keep silent. Police will manipulate what you say and can almost convince you to confess even if you're not guilty. That's why we see false confessions. These things do happen. And it is always a better idea to just keep silent and say that you want to talk to an attorney. And then you can talk to that attorney and tell them what you want to say. And they'll tell you whether or not it's a good idea to say it or whether it would be better to just remain silent.
Yeah, that's a tricky situation too, because if you know you've done nothing wrong, you want to your natural reaction is to clear the air.
Right. I have nothing to hide, so I can just, speak freely. And I've had clients who have done this in the past and have ended up being charged with a crime that they didn't commit. And because they explained so well to the officer what they thought, proved their innocence, they ended up being stuck in a legal battle with the state of Oregon for a year and a half, arguing over a situation. And during that year and a half, we're not able to see their children.
Oh, my goodness.
In the end, they were acquitted. We were able to get them acquitted in a jury trial, despite the fact that the state of Oregon was adamant that they had committed a crime. No crime had been committed. And I firmly believe if he had had an attorney with him when he made his first statements, he wouldn't have ended up in that situation.
Interesting. Wow. So self-incrimination. That's what it all kind of comes down to. Even when you didn't do anything, man. Yeah, that's a hard thing to remember, I think. Like to say hey, you know what? I better not talk to you. I don't want anything to get misconstrued or anything like that.
Right. I mean, we're raised from young children to trust the police.
Absolutely. Trust and respect. Yeah.
Respect them 100%. Trust them. If you're lost or you need help, someone's breaking into your house, definitely trust them.
Yeah.
But if it's the police coming to you thinking that you've done something, do not trust them.
Talk about the importance of knowing your rights under the Miranda warning, and what should you do if you're approached by police? I know you said use your rights to remain silent, and all that stuff, but what's your best advice for someone as far as how to approach that situation off the bat?
So I think the most important thing to remember is that you want to stay calm and you want to be respectful and polite. You also want to follow directions. Even if the officer is doing something that is clearly illegal, whether that's profiling or any other thing that you can think of, you want to cooperate in the moment, because what's most important is your safety and their safety. So if you cooperate, you are likely going to be fine. You may end up needing to talk to an attorney. There may be other things that happen, but you probably won't get shot. And that's something that everybody wants to avoid. So it's important to remember that Miranda is not always required, but you always have the right to remain silent.
Okay, that's a really good distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. There are certain things that you are required to do. For example, in Oregon, if you are pulled over and an officer asks you to do a breathalyzer, if you don't comply, you're automatically suspended for a year, whether you were under the influence or not. That's just a state law statute. If an officer approaches you and asks for identification, you have to comply. You have to tell them who you are. So you always want to give some information, who you are, date of birth, social security, phone number, address, those kinds of things. But you're not required to do anything else. You're not required to say where you were going or where you're coming from. You're not required to answer any other questions. You can simply say, I am invoking my right to remain silent, and I'd like to talk to a lawyer. And that's it.
And that's it. That's interesting you said about being pulled over with the breathalyzer, because I've definitely heard attorneys say, don't ever blow in the breathalyzer.
Yeah, a lot of them say that. And that may be a good idea in certain states where you aren't going to lose your license. There are two different processes with licenses, suspensions in Oregon. The Department of Transportation has the power to suspend you if you fail to comply with the direction of an officer telling you to do a breathalyzer. And then the court has the power to suspend your license. Mm-hmm. And so if you are under the influence, it's likely not going to change by refusing to comply with a breathalyzer. And often people think, well, if I refuse the breathalyzer, but I say, hey, you can take my blood, they think, well, that'll be at least another hour. So maybe the level will go down. It won't be so bad. That rarely works out in your benefit, and you're risking your license.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talk about remaining silent and requesting an attorney. I think a lot of people are afraid that it's an admission of guilt. Like if you're just like, I'm not saying anything, I want my attorney, when you see the TV shows and the movies, you're like, oh, that person did it, And so like, that's our gut reaction. Like, but that's not how we should think, correct?
Right. You shouldn't think that way. It is not an admission of guilt. Your refusal to speak cannot be used against you. So what that means is that if you are charged with something and you go to trial, for example, the prosecutor is not allowed to tell the jury that you refuse to talk. They're not allowed to comment on it in any way. And they're not supposed to consider it in any way. Neither is a judge. So oftentimes a judge gets a little bit more information than a jury would, but they are well-versed in the law and understand what it means when you can't consider something. And so keeping silent is not implicating yourself. It's not saying, hey, I'm guilty. It is the smart thing to do. It is in your best interest to just remain silent. Let somebody who is aware of the system and how it works step in and take care of you. That's what we're here for.
You see in TV and movies a lot. If you're not going to talk to me here, we're going downtown, like that sort of a thing. Is that if you're forced, or if they take you to the police station for questioning, do they have to give Miranda rights then? Because is that considered an arrest if they forcibly make you go to the police station?
So I would argue in a case if the Miranda warnings were not given, that was an improper interrogation and they should have given you Miranda warnings. It depends on the situation though. If they physically take you down to the police station, that implies custodial interrogation. That means that you're in their custody, and you can't leave, or you don't think you can leave. And in those situations,
good point.
Right? That's when a Miranda warning should be given.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you get a phone call inviting you down to the station to talk to them and they question you in a room, that may not be a custodial interrogation. You may not be in the police custody. But I will say that if an officer wants to talk to you and has questions for you, they probably already have everything they need to arrest you. And whether you say something or not is not going to help the situation. If anything, it's going to make it worse. Okay.
So even with that famous TV line of, if you don't talk to me now, we'll do it downtown or whatever, like you still say, just remain silent.
Still remain silent. Yeah, they have a lot of tactics they'll use, like, this is your only chance to help yourself.
Yeah, I've heard that one too. Right? They watch the same shows I do.
Right. If you talk to me now, I can help you. I'll tell the prosecutor that you cooperated. Well, police don't actually have any control or authority over what is charged. That is the district attorney's job.
Right.
And a police officer has no authority to force the DA to give you a better deal or a lesser charge. So if you want to make a deal, as they say on television, if you give me some information and you get immunity, that's something that you definitely need an attorney for, because if it's not in writing before you give the information, it's not going to happen. So it's just think of it as more manipulation by the police. And remember that they're allowed to lie. They're allowed to manipulate you. They're allowed to do what is necessary to convince you to give them a statement that implicates yourself, that confession, if you will.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That puts you in a weird spot. Like, what is your advice to someone as far as when to call an attorney? At what point, in this process of a police officer talking to you? I mean, right away?
The earlier, the better.
Okay.
Yeah. The earlier, the better. And if you are already in the situation where you've already talked to the police, get an attorney as soon as you can. It's always best to have us involved as fast as possible. If you think that you may be questioned by officers but haven't been questioned by officers yet, that's a great time to talk to an attorney. We may be able to tell you, oh, you've got nothing to worry about, or we can make arrangements to talk to the police on your behalf or go with you. There are a lot of things that we can do ahead of charges that can help mitigate the situation. And
that's, you say that even if you're like, hey, I didn't do anything, even then you should still do that just to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of In Your Defense with Amy Bingham. If you'd like to get in touch with Amy, you can reach out to her through her website, amybinghamlaw.com. And please like and subscribe to the channel. We always love to have all of you here. Amy, great stuff as always. Thanks for chatting.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.